Hello and welcome to Sacred Democracy. I am Maddi. Cheers. I am absolutely thrilled to welcome a new friend, I hope, Jen Trepeck. Did I say your name right?
Trepeck.
Sorry, Jen. But really, really pleased that she joined us. She is a wonderful young person who has her own business. She started a business called, I want to get this right, Better Life Now LLC. She's an optimal health coach. She has a wonderful podcast you should all tune into, very easy to find on iPad, on the iTunes podcast, called Salad with a Side of Fries. Really terrific stuff. Very easy to understand, things that everybody should know about nutrition. And like, I love this line from your outro, Jen, where you go, thank you for being here and making yourself and your health a priority. Because that really is what I feel we need. It's one of the reasons I really wanted you to come out on. I also love that you have a business background. She's a graduate from University of Michigan Ross School of Business. She started her business while she was working in hedge funds. I mean, she's a very impressive person. When I read your bio, I said, this is an impressive person.
Maddi, thank you so much. I'm honored to be here and I'm excited, and I appreciate, your feedback and commentary on Salad with a Side of Fries.
Yeah, you guys definitely need to tune into that. And
thanks.
The reason, a lot of times people will ask me, and I've done sort of this topic before, what does this have to do with democracy? And I think that because everybody's so interested in healthcare, because we have the whole pandemic going on right now, that we really do have to depend on self-care as healthcare. And one of the wonderful things about your podcast is it's free, accurate advice. Because
Thanks.
There's a lot of stuff, I must get ads every single day for buy this, buy that, boost your immune system, do this, do that. And you don't know who to believe. And
right.
What I loved in listening to your podcast, I love that you do the little nutrition bites where you tell people like easy things they can do this week, find out what kind of eater you are, and then you go into more detail about that. These are things that people can really make use of in their own lives without spending a fortune.
Thank you. Yeah, that's the intention, right? I think you started to talk about the interplay between democracy and nutrition. And really, what we all learned as nutrition is not based on science and how the body works. It's actually based on economics. So democracy, yes. So democracy and everything else that we've learned has really played into where our healthcare system is now and what this looks like for all of us. And so the objective with Salad with a Side of Fries is to really focus on what I call the nutrition education we're all supposed to know and no one ever taught us.
Right. I love that too. That is exactly it. And, I'm doing some work with a group called Restorative Justice on the Rise. And one of the things that we talk about is this idea of how does this low nutrition in poor income neighborhoods affect people? So if we're going to look at bringing justice to people, one of the things we have to make sure we bring is healthy food.
Right. And this is sort of twofold. On the one hand, it's a recognition and an understanding that nutrition is critical for our health and that medicine and nutrition go hand in hand. And then on the other side of it is saying, how do we get fresh food to these communities that are otherwise essentially food deserts? And just to kind of clear up, because I think the idea of a food desert for many of us, it's a little confusing of a term. And it's not that in those communities there isn't food. It's that there isn't fresh food. Mm-hmm. So their food sources in these communities tend to be McDonald's, Wendy's, Popeye, Taco Bell, the fast food casual dining situation that isn't necessarily also nutritious.
Right. And one of the things
Yep.
that I love that you said in one of the podcasts was how to eat and how to cheat. And the reason
Yeah.
I say that is when you're working in poor communities. We have a friend, we're adopted into a Caddo family, and the Caddo people, small group of Native Americans in Oklahoma. And she's Caddo. She went off, she became a nutritionist. She came back to try to re-educate people into how to eat in her own community. And there's
Yep.
a lot of resistance. So really, I mean, even people who have access to fresh food, there's all kinds of resistance.
Right.
You talked about that in one of your podcasts about where you're talking about why are you eating?
Right.
And so it's a slow educational process. And I loved what you said about how to eat and how to cheat, because if we make it so hard for people, they're never going to change.
Right. And I think the how to eat and how to cheat fundamentally comes back to balance, right? So I talk about it like we talk about in business, the 80-20 rule, right? 80% of your revenue comes from 20% of your customers. 80% of your business output comes from 20% of your effort. If we live life by the 80-20 rule, and we focus on our nutrition, 80% of the time we're making healthful, nutritious choices. 20% of the time we have the occasional indulgence. We can go on and live the rest of our lives and be happy and healthy, right, and not living in this black or white. Yep. Sometimes I describe it, and I wish I had a better visual for this, where if you were to sort of picture the alphabet lined up left to right, a lot of times for many of us, that pendulum swings from A to Z. We're on or we're off. It's black or it's white. But what if we could learn to live where that pendulum swing is really going from, K to O, just in the middle, and kind of back and forth and in that range. And we're living in the gray area. Like I say, it's not black or white, it's gray, and life happens in the gray. Right. That's where we get to enjoy life. I think sometimes when we're in these extremes, I always say to people, if you're opting out of life, if we're not going to when we could go to social things, right? If we're not participating in life events because of, our efforts to be healthful, then we're in a sense still not healthful. Yes. And we're in that lack mindset, yes. In business all the time now. You probably know this, and it's originally a spiritual concept, this idea, are you living in a scarcity mindset or an abundance mindset, right? So your business always has to be, if you're starting your own business, in an abundance mindset, which is one of the other reasons I was so excited to have you agree to come on, because we are also changing what and how we are going to earn money. I mean, there's lots of people that have lost money. There's lots of my husband and I have a business. We've got to figure out how to switch it online within the next 2 months. There's stress that gets involved with that, which means there's stress eating, stress nutrition. Yep. So it's really good to have somebody that can talk to people from that perspective of, here's how you do it. Here's how you go step by step. And people's steps are different too. Like some people can boom, and in 2 weeks, I got something new that they're doing. And some people, it takes a little longer, which is what I liked about the discovering what kind of eater you are, just as an example, because you have to discover that. You have to take responsibility for discovering how you function in the world. Yes. And so, tackling the business side of this first for a second, I do business consulting for health professionals as well, and doctors, salons, and spas, to work with them to implement wellness into their practice. And so one of the things that we always talk about is, what's the mission and vision, right? What's the why? Why are we here? What's the objective? And then how can we brainstorm additional ways to execute the mission and vision so that our clients and our patients are getting what they're looking for? So as we continue to shift to this online world, it's not about changing what you're doing. It's about shifting the accessibility of what you're doing and continuing to bring your clients and customers and patients exactly what they're looking for in the moment they're looking for it and being ready, right?
Right. I love that. Being ready. That's such an important concept. I think that's where people get stuck. We were very fortunate in our business that we had people that were interested in switching from an in-person program in schools to being online. And they're longtime clients. I mean, everybody that made the switch, private schools we were doing for probably 20, 25 years. So it was nice. We got to do that. We got to look at making that switch.
Yep.
And I think that's exactly the idea is you have to be ready. You have to find a way to get ready to do whatever it is you're going to do, whether it has to do with starting a new business, joining a new business, or changing your diet. You've got to find a way to be ready for that.
Right. And maybe there are certain shifts you're ready for and certain shifts you're not. I was actually having a conversation with a client this morning where a lot of our behavior shifts, right? I like to think about it in small steps rather than I think what a lot of us have done in the past of week one of something, right? We get the book, we read the book, we're trying to do the whole thing. And then we're like, oh, this is impossible. I can't do this. Forget it. Right. And the whole thing goes out the window. But what if, and I think the late night eating is an example, an easy example of this. So let's say you tend to eat at night, at the end of the day, you're watching TV and it's like the munchies. So maybe the first step is just shifting what you're eating when you're eating at night so that those foods aren't counterproductive.
Right.
And then maybe a week or two later, it's checking in to say, am I actually hungry? Like, why am I eating? And it may not mean even changing that you're eating, but just an awareness of why. And then maybe a week or two after that, it's like, hey, I realize I'm not actually hungry in this moment. I'm going to choose something else. And we can progress in that way. It doesn't have to be, well, all late night eating out the window this moment, you know?
Yeah.
And I think when we can look at this in terms of the long run and the big picture, it's okay if it takes us a month to get to that place of shifting the late night eating to maybe it's late night reading, right? But the idea that in week one or overnight, we're going to go from one to the other is often what we've all done in the past.
Right.
And what has resulted in that yo-yo back and forth on-off thing.
Yep.
One of the other things that I always say all the time is the energy we bring to life each day enters the body through nutrition. So as entrepreneurs or business owners, you are your business. So the energy you bring to life, the energy you bring to your business, the energy you're bringing to everything enters the body through nutrition. And so if you think of your body like a car, right? And how would your car run if you put paint in the gas tank? Right?
Like that, yeah.
Or the other extreme of when sometimes we don't eat, right? If we have a couple gallons of gas left in the tank, but we're expecting to drive across the country, it doesn't work. The engine burns out. The car doesn't perform. And our body is really the same way in that respect. We have to give it proper fuel and enough fuel to do what we need to do, both mentally, physically, everything.
Everything. Right. And that's I love the way you explain these things to people. That's one of the ways that I think people, and especially young people, kids, need to hear about it. And the other thing that I find in the way you teach and talk is you take the punitive aspect out of it. Like there seems to be so much, especially in like a lot of the stuff that I get that I've been seeing lately online, like the direction is forget about collagen. And what they're really saying is forget about other people's collagen, get my collagen, because if their collagen doesn't have this, then it's not really good for you and you have to buy my collagen. And that is really another problem to overcome with dealing with people is advertising. Yes. Advertisers are very good at getting you to buy stuff, to consume things by pressing all your little emotional buttons.
And it's not even just the emotional buttons, it's the intellectual buttons. Like, we've heard low carb is good. So now every package says low carb. We've heard that mushrooms are really beneficial. Now there's a million supplements on the market that are claiming to be mushroom supplements, whether they are or they're not. Right. So it's complicated. And one of the things that I always say to people is, to overcome the marketing stuff, when it comes to everyday food choices, we want to learn to read labels so that we are not prey to what the marketers are telling us on the front of the package. Because technically, even trans fats, for example, right? Trans fats for everybody, like we've all heard, don't eat them, right? We've all heard that, they were outlawed, that you're not allowed to have trans fats in foods. Well, not quite. So your foods have to be, right, exactly. Your foods have to be 0 grams of trans fat per serving. Okay, to be 0 grams, it has to be 0.5 or less per serving. Now, I find this mind-boggling because everywhere else in math in our lifetimes, we always learn that at 0.5 you round up.
Right.
Whatever, right? That aside.
Exactly.
That aside, it can be 0.5 or less, and they can still write 0 grams of trans fats on the label, right? On the nutrition facts and on the front of the package.
I didn't know that.
Right? So in order to determine if there are trans fats in them, we have to read the ingredients. So the keywords there are hydrogenated or hydrolyzed. And those words in relation to a fat. So like an oil or,
Right.
And essentially, just for the sake of education, a trans fat is an oil or a fat that was liquid at room temperature, that was pumped with hydrogen to make it a solid at room temperature. Right? So think about when, like the oil in your peanut butter, if you have natural peanut butter, right? The oil separates.
Right.
Or if you make a salad dressing, the oil separates.
Right.
Right? So in packaged foods, they pump the oil full of hydrogen to make it a solid at room temperature so that it can sit on the shelves and not fall apart, and it keeps the foods moist, although I hate that word, right? It makes the foods last longer. So I sometimes say the longer the food shelf life, the shorter your shelf life.
Oh, I love that. That's a great one. So I'm going to steal that. Let me write that down.
Yeah, right. Of course. So, but that's the idea of being a really smart consumer.
Right.
And saying, okay, like the labels thing, I'm going to take this on and I'm going to learn a little bit. Right. Yep. So I have a couple podcast episodes for that. So we don't have to spend the entire time now talking about it because it's a dense subject.
Yeah.
But when it comes to the supplementation piece, and you and I have spoken a lot about this, there is a lot of good science around supplementation.
Right.
There's also a lot of partial science. And so part of what happens is that you can have a supplement that's even designed based on the good science, where it's using the right ingredient, but perhaps for economic sake, so that it's not exorbitantly expensive to the consumer without the education to understand why it's expensive, right? Maybe it doesn't contain the therapeutic dosage of the correct ingredient. So I see this a lot with omega-3s.
Oh, really?
So omega-3s, proper therapeutic dosage for health maintenance is 3 grams or 3,000 milligrams of DHA and EPA.
Mm-hmm.
If you're trying to treat something with omegas, you would probably double that every day.
Wow.
So I have had people come to me with bottles and bottles and bottles of omega-3s. And there was one that had 300 milligrams of DHA and EPA combined. Well, that's a 1/10 of the daily dosage that you would need. So this bottle that's supposed to last you 30 days would really last you 3.
Whoa.
So while it seems really cost effective, the reality is you're not getting what you need from it. And that's why, part of why I think there's so much confusion around supplementation and so much conflicting information around supplementation. Because, you know, if someone's experience is with these low dose options,
right,
or it's not made with the form of the ingredient that was actually scientifically studied.
Yep.
Same health benefits. And so someone with that experience or a health professional with that experience is going to say it doesn't do anything. Right?
Right.
Alternatively, someone else may have a tremendous experience and may spend what someone else might consider a small fortune on their supplementation and additional support. So with this piece of it, I recommend to everybody, have someone in your life who is a trusted source of this information, because the average person is not going to do all of that research on every single ingredient to figure out which one they're supposed to buy when they're at the store. Yeah. So if you have questions on that, I am making myself available to your audience.
Oh, thank you, Jennifer.
Of course.
That's great.
Yeah, but it's one of those things where I think, you know, the stores that sell these things, I call it the Wild West, right? It's the Wild West of these aisles. And so you want to go in from an educated place and know what you're looking for.
Yep. And the problem in poor communities, I was talking to I work with a naturopath, and I work with a gentleman who does biofeedback. And the gentleman that does biofeedback, Dr. Marks, was telling me that most lower income people are going to get their supplements from a drugstore.
Yes.
So they're going into CVS, they're buying the cheapest thing there is, and it's garbage. And they think that they're helping themselves, which they want to. They see what's going on in the world. They want to be healthy. They want their kids to be healthy. They lack information, which a lot of us do. Let me tell you, there's plenty of people in the upper income world, as you know, that lack information, or the correct information, like what we're talking about. But especially in lower income communities, they don't, like you said earlier, when we talk about a food desert, we're also talking about a supplement desert, because that's their choice. That's it. You know? And I want to go back to this thing, you know, with the idea of the food desert and supplementation. I mean, supplementation is designed to fill in the gaps where our nutrition falls short. Oh, that's good. Yes. We cannot live relying on the supplementation, but putting paint in our gas tank and thinking that we're going to undo the paint, that we can miraculously internally turn paint into gasoline with enough stuff, with enough supplements. And that's not really how it works. So you're absolutely right. It goes back to fundamentally in every community, making sure that we have access to fruits and vegetables and whole natural foods that came from the earth. Right. Really true. And one of the people I found in my community that was a wonderful free resource was actually my pharmacist. Yes. Wonderful resource. And I think because they are doctors and they are sort of independent, like they're not selling what's on the shelf. If you ask them, well, what's this medicine? One of the medicines I had prescribed, and he looks at all of it and goes, I wouldn't take this unless, you really, really had to take this, and they'll look up medicines, they'll look up vitamins, they'll look up brands of supplements for you. And that really for anybody, because most people, no matter what income level they are, have within their community some kind of drugstore, a Rite Aid, a CVS, a Walgreens. ask the pharmacist. They're wonderful.
Absolutely. The pharmacist is a tremendous resource. And I recommend that to my clients all the time. If you have a question about a supplement or a supplement interaction with your medications, the number one person to ask is your pharmacist.
Yeah.
They are much more educated in the contraindications and how things work together, nutritionally, supplementationally, and pharmaceutically.
Right.
That's a piece of their education. With many of our health professionals, nutrition and supplementation are sadly not a part of their education. And so a lot of times our health professionals, they just don't know. And it's not entirely their fault. It's not a part of the curriculum.
No.
It's not what they're taught. And so one of the questions, if you are going to ask your health professional about some supplementation, the question to ask is, will anything in this hurt me? Because that's a very different question than should I take this?
Right.
The liability that they feel in saying, should I take this, is tremendous. Right? And it's a different question. Will anything in here hurt me? And they can look at something and know if something will hurt you more than a health professional trained in our traditional medical schools will know if something in there is good for you. Because again, it's just not part of what they're taught. And I also think that part of what they're taught, now this is more anecdotal than fact, but I think part of what they're taught is more to say no than I don't know.
Right. And that does have to do with medical liability.
Right.
I read a study, Joanne Angel, who was just on before us, we tackled this problem a few months ago from a different angle. But during that time of researching, take self-care, I found this article on California had been the first state to pass a requirement that all doctors take certain amount of hours of nutrition. I can't remember what it is now. I probably should have looked it up, but let's say it's 30. Everybody, which is hardly anything. And it was hardly anything, right? So they passed this law that in order to become a doctor in California, you have to have these 30 hours of nutrition education, right? And then they decided, well, that's a lot. Do we really want to require it? Ultimately, what happened is it went away. So it's not a requirement any longer in a very open-minded state like California.
Right.
And that's why I think it really is important for people to become aware on their own. And it is difficult. It is challenging when you're worrying about your kids, especially nowadays, when you're worrying about your job, when things are so upside down sometimes.
Yeah.
But it's also the most important way that you can stay healthy.
Yes. I think I don't even know where to start. It's so critical for our health. It is fundamental.
Mm-hmm.
And it is the most important thing we can do, right?
Yeah.
That is actual wellness care. That is actual preventative health care.
Right.
Because one of the things that we'll say to people is, you aren't healthy the day before a heart attack. And maybe just because you've been diagnosed with heart disease, it doesn't mean that your liver and your kidney and your colon and everything else is fine. Right. Our diagnosis is based on whichever organ failed first. Because everything in the body is connected. Nothing exists in isolation.
Right.
Same with our foods, right? Nothing exists in isolation. We have to make sure that we're getting the whole complement in order for everything to function correctly.
Right. And that's the word, function. That's why functional medicine, which sadly not covered by health insurance. This is, and I do think I do think we are in a transitional phase. I think we are moving away from conventional medicine to MD doctors who are functional medicine people. And for those who may not know what functional medicine is, do you want to explain it or should I explain it?
Yeah, essentially functional medicine is about supporting the body's proper function and supporting everything that our body is supposed to do on its own
Mhm.
and looks at the underlying cause of symptoms and illness and disease. So it's very much about unraveling all the layers to find the underlying root cause of whatever you might be experiencing.
Right.
The other side of that, which is what most of us have been experiencing all our lives, is that we show up with symptoms and our doctors treat those symptoms, often with medications. Then that medication has side effects. And
Right.
now we're treating the symptoms of those side effects. And it becomes this, pile on situation of symptoms upon symptoms upon symptoms. Whereas if we unraveled to the underlying root cause, maybe we wouldn't need to be taking anything. We could repair our body's proper function
Right.
and support our actual optimal health.
Right. Absolutely. So, and when you and I talked the first time, I told you that I had been diagnosed with an autoimmune disease. I am not going to
Yes.
say the name of it for my own, because in knowing what I know about words,
Yes.
sometimes the diagnosis, we know now how the brain functions. So you have, if any strong feeling that you have, good or bad, attaches to that experience. So the experience of being diagnosed with a disease that you're then told cannot be cured,
Right.
it messes up your system right there. Right there. So there's two reasons why I'm not going to say the name. The other reason is, other than to say it's an autoimmune diagnosis, the other reason is that when I have engaged with people with the same diagnosis, they're very, very resistant to looking at the nutritional and supplemental component, the functional medicine component, partly sometimes because their insurance isn't going to pay for it and they can't afford it on
Right.
their own, and partly because we're a little brainwashed here, into thinking that no, I got to take the pill, or brainwashed into thinking I want to be cured right now.
Yes.
So we want it now, we want it now, we want it now. So just give me the pill. I don't want to hear about all this. So what I'm going to tell
Right.
you, audience, in my experience from the shocking diagnosis and then deciding I'm not taking the prescribed medicine, because I was raised by a scientist whose motto was question authority, question everything. One of the most fortunate things in my life.
I was going to say, how wonderful for
Yeah,
you
I
to
know.
have that. Amazing.
Yes, raised by a scientist and an artist. How wonderful is that? So lucky me, and really lucky me, because I'm also in a position where I can make this decision to eat clean, to eat healthy, to purchase certain supplements that I fully researched, to have access to being able to pay without insurance, a naturopath, a biofeedback person, so the problem becomes that people who don't have that ability don't have that access.
Yeah.
So when we look at something like, let's say, food justice, which is or supplement justice, like what we're talking about now, it's a matter of education and a matter of access. So
Yes.
I can tell you that from the beginning of December, when I could not get off the couch, I could not turn my head, I could barely move. I literally spent weeks sitting on the couch, sleeping on the couch, not moving, to engaging with a physical therapist and doing all these things that I've done, to now where I am pretty much back to normal.
Amazing.
I know. And I certainly believe in the power of community healing. I certainly, there's a lot of alternative stuff I do. I believe in the power of prayer. I definitely stay on that positive line, but one of the realizations for me in having dealt with this issue is that not everybody has access to this cure. And
Right.
I don't want to call it a cure, to this healing,
Right.
to where
This form of treatment.
this form of treatment, where you have what Dr. Amy Myers, who's very well known, who does a lot of work with, I have her book called, now what can I call it? It's the immune,
It's autoimmune something, isn't it?
yeah, autoimmune solution, right?
Yes.
The autoimmune solution. So when she's talking about all of these things and talking about how you have to start this eating plan and do this for 30 days before I can tell you it worked. It would at least work for me.
Yeah.
You know? And that's the other thing, is you need to go to somebody that's going to work with you, not work with a class of people. You know, that's the other problem with conventional medicine is, here's the pill you take for what I just diagnosed you with, you and everybody else, the millions of you that have it. This is it.
Right.
You know?
And it's challenging. I want to go back to what you mentioned about this idea of self-education. Because, you know, if there's one thing we can accomplish today, if we empower you to learn more for yourself, I mean, I have chills from that, right? Like that's the goal. And with that, look also at the source of everything that you're learning and you're reading. Because, for example, a lot of our, like going back to that California thing, if the doctors in California had 30 hours of nutrition added to their curriculum,
right?
You know, is it the same nutrition? A lot of our dietitians and nutritionists are getting, and some of them are fantastic. I have met wonderful dietitians and nutritionists.
Yes.
And I have also met dietitians and nutritionists who take what they learned in school as gospel and maybe didn't do necessarily any other additional research. And one of the things that I found is that a lot of those programs are funded by Coke and Pepsi and Kraft and a lot of these packaged foods companies that have a vested interest in supporting our consumption of those foods. And so it influences the nutrition that we're getting. So similarly, when we go to the internet, perhaps, to do this learning, right? My recommendation is to focus your education learning more about how our body processes food and how foods impact our body, because that science doesn't change. And so if we can have a foundation of science from which we can then evaluate all of the things that we hear, like your friend following one diet and Instagram telling you to do another and Facebook ads telling you to do yet another, and the news telling us today that broccoli is the greatest thing on the planet, and then tomorrow they're telling us that broccoli causes cancer, right? Like if we it's overwhelming. But if we have a foundation of science from which we can then evaluate all of these additional pieces, then we're in a much better place for our long-term health.
Yes. And that's the piece that often I think gets left out of the training. It's when I was listening to your podcast, I thought, you know, at first I just love the name. Let me say that.
Thank you.
With a side of fries. That's like genius. Who wouldn't listen to that? You know, and my husband can tell you vegetables, not my same thing. I had to like develop a love for vegetables and dealing.
Many people do.
You know, most of them get thrown in my smoothie with my fruit, you know, but just to make sure I'm getting the proper amount. But you definitely, I can tell you, you definitely, the more you eat them, the less weird they are. And you know, I grew up in a very, you know, middle to slightly upper middle income family, but in the 50s. You know, I graduated high school in 71, so it was really meat and potatoes time. So, you know, we grew up, you know, I think peas were a big green vegetable and occasionally canned string beans. It wasn't that we didn't have something green, but nobody, I mean, salads was like new, you know, that was when I was much older and people were talking about being vegetarians, you know, which was almost a political thing, not a like health thing, you know. So.
But notice how many people were being diagnosed with heart disease at the time of eating meat and potatoes in the 50s and 60s compared to now.
Right.
Not as many.
That's true.
And so it goes, so it goes back to not just what we're eating, but the quality of what we're eating.
Oh, brilliant.
So it's, again, like, I wish there were easy answers. I wish this wasn't so complicated, but it's our food industry, going back to everything that we've been talking about. I mean, our food industry, even, I should have looked up the exact number, but even the vitamin C in an orange today does not have the same vitamin C that our parents ate or our grandparents ate 30 years ago.
Right, right. And a lot of it was grown at home. So this whole, I think I mentioned this last week too, I was listening to Greg Braden speak about the real way to make sure everybody all over the world is healthy is going back to a localized food source.
Yes.
That not only does it help hugely eliminate air pollution, and because, you know, we're not trucking things or flying things all over the place, but you're getting your food fresh and teaching people how to raise that food and creating spaces in cities where children learn to grow their own food, and then families are growing their own food. But like you said, there is a vested interest on the part of big food manufacturers to see that that doesn't happen.
Right. And I think it goes back to each of us, to choosing local. Right. Yeah. And the reason why, and I want to explain, because I firmly believe, as we've talked about education, I think when we understand why, we're more willing to make the shifts.
Yes.
So why is it that local gives us better nutrition? Right? So our food comes from vegetables and fruit, come from the soil.
Right.
As soon as the nutrients come from the soil into the vegetable or the fruit, as soon as that is pulled from the vine, it is no longer getting nutrients from the soil.
Right.
Well, so let's play this out. If by the time, and as we know, if by the time the apple gets to our grocery store, it is bruised or a little mushy, right? Not as hard, we're not buying it.
Right.
So in order for that food to be perfect when it gets to your grocery store, you got to work it backwards. Well, where was that fruit grown? Right? Was it grown locally? Or was it grown on the other side of the country or the other side of the world? And so if it was grown on the other side of the world, or the other side of the state for that matter, right? It is pulled from the vine before it is ripe, so that it is ripe and pretty when it gets to your grocery store.
Right.
So if we're pulling our food too soon off the vine, it's not getting the nutrients from the soil. Then we add to that our soil doesn't necessarily have the same nutrients that it had 30, 40 years ago. Remember when we were growing up and learning about crop rotation?
Right.
Yeah. Growing different things takes different things from the soil and puts certain things back into it, right? There's this give and a take with the soil, and that changes with each different thing that we grow. But our farming system doesn't necessarily allow crop rotation in the same way now as it did 30, 40 years ago. Right. So if we're not rotating those crops, we're always pulling the same nutrients from the soil. Our soil is now depleted. So even if it stayed on the vine, right? So
how healthy would it be?
Right. So the idea of eating local and going to your local farmers market is that you'll notice things are only sold when they're in season. And you buy different things in the summer and the fall and the winter and the spring.
Right.
And that helps with the crop rotation. That helps with things being able to ripen on the vine.
And that's what's so important about CSAs, community-sponsored agriculture. You get, and I had to learn this the hard way, but when you sign up for a CSA share, you get your vegetables and fruits and whatever you can go pick up over the 3 days they allow you to go pick it up.
Yep.
Nowadays, a lot of them are delivering, and you just have to know that you're getting seasonal stuff. So I remember the first time I signed up for a CSA, and I had my friend go and pick it up for me because we were out of town, and she's like, "You got like 3 beets and a thing of lettuce, and what's going on?"
Right.
And there, but I was 10 years ago, not educated as I am, You know, I
Right.
was not educated in this field, so I'm thinking I'm getting ripped off. You know,
Right.
but when you understand, like you said, that it's the growing cycle and the wonderfulness of things coming to you in season, the
Yep.
nutritional value of things coming to you as they've ripened, as they've grown to their full size. We have two big gardens out back that mostly my husband takes care of because he's really good at that.
Yeah. I live in the city, so if he wants to send anything my way, I'm in.
Oh, okay. Well, when we can stop when we don't have to be so socially distanced, maybe you could come out and we'll make
Perfect. Yeah.
But I'm really glad that you explained that about why local is so important and why really we have to educate people in cities to find out how to do this. You know, I have a cousin who works in architecture, and they have all kinds of ways that people can grow things on their
Roof.
balconies, on the roof, how a whole building can grow this stuff. And we just need to put it in the hands of people that can really, really use it.
Yeah,
go ahead.
No, there's a school in, I want to say near New Orleans, that implemented composting. So, which is basically taking food waste and turning it into usable soil.
Right.
So then all of the kids in this elementary school, the different grades, participate in different parts of the process. And they've built a garden that they are using all of their self-made soil, right?
Right.
Grow. And one of the things the teacher there talks about is that when we change the children, when we give them this information, they bring it home and they teach their families.
Yes.
And when we teach enough families, we can change a community, and enough communities can make a much bigger shift.
Oh.
And so it starts small. It starts with each of us saying, what can I grow myself? I'm going to choose something local. I'm going to choose to eat vegetables and fruit and quality protein.
Right. Quality. And not so much. We don't have to eat as much protein as people even think.
I mean, I generally find a lot of people are under eating protein.
Oh.
But it's also a misconception about where our protein is coming from, and what our protein sources are. But I always say, so this is a little not what we're in this particular moment, but for everybody, a nugget that you can take with you, I call them always nutrition nuggets, protein and fiber at every meal makes removing fat no big deal. So protein is clean, lean protein. Fiber is vegetables and sometimes fruit. And a meal is really anytime you eat. A meal or a snack, it's just a function of how much you're eating at the time. Right. But it's always protein and fiber. Clean, lean protein, vegetables, and sometimes fruit. And that's our recipe for success, for the most part. And so when we can think about it that way and focus on getting those fresh foods and eating what naturally exists in the world, right? We can leave ourselves in a much better position to have that foundation of health for our body to function and our health and all of these other things and our mind and our energy and everything else. But what I wanted to go back to also in terms of what you're talking about of, getting everybody quality choices, whether you're growing it yourself or not. One of the other things that some communities have implemented is buying from their major grocery stores the stuff that they can no longer sell, which hasn't actually gone bad yet, but just isn't going to sell. And bringing that to some of these communities that would otherwise be a food desert. And it's much discounted because otherwise it was going to be thrown out. So at least there's something, right? So it's discounted and it's quality, healthful foods that maybe just need to be eaten in a shorter time frame. Or maybe it's the bruised apple that no one in your grocery store is eating, but it's still an apple that is a much better choice than a Twinkie.
Yep.
And so in certain areas, that is a tremendous role. So I think for each of us, in our own independent activist way, I keep talking about this in the hopes that maybe it'll do something, right? That more of our communities will say, hey, maybe we can do that. Maybe we can talk to some of the grocery stores in our area. And instead of throwing out what they feel like they can't sell anymore, like maybe we can drive it, a few miles away and help a community, because in a country of so many people with so much food waste, we also have so many people who are food insecure.
Right.
And so it's two sides of this that I personally cannot reconcile. I can't understand.
No, so. I'm totally on board with you with that. It's just amazing. I think I read a statistic once that we waste enough food in this country to actually feed every poor person in the world that day. Every day, every single, that's just not, come on.
Right.
And food waste is a huge issue. It really is. And I am so thrilled that you were here and addressed this so beautifully. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Please, in the couple of minutes we have left, tell everybody how they can get a hold of you if they want to or need to. And one more time, I'm going to tell you all, listen on iTunes to Salad with a Side of Fries. Easiest way to get a quick education on all this. But give all your contact info, please, Jen.
Yes, of course. So Salad with a Side of Fries on your favorite podcast listening platform, Salad with a Side of Fries podcast.com, or Instagram is really easy because you could direct message me and we can have a individual conversation, or, follow us and check in. There's lots of information there. So my Instagram is at Jen Trepeck, JENNTREPECK.
Wonderful.
So reach out. I'd love to hear from you. More than anything, like, what are you taking away from this? What was most helpful for you to hear? I can't wait to engage with you and hear what's happening and stay in touch.
Yes. Oh, thank you. And please, audience, same thing here. Please let us know. Once again, I messed up and I didn't see comments and everything, but please, if you're watching this later, comments, please share this very, very important information with anybody you can. Get a hold of me, get a hold of Jennifer. As you know, you can get a hold of me, hopefully, as you know, at Maddi, Maddi, at womensoneness.com. Anytime. I'd love to hear from you. We'd both love to hear from you. And who knows, maybe you and I together, and Jen, we can be the people that start trucking some of that food into the communities that need it.
Yes, so, Maddi, thank you again for having me. Such a pleasure to chat with you always.
Oh, really. Same here, Jen. I hope you'll come back. We'll do it again sometime, really. So thank you all again for listening. Thank you, Bobby Lacera, for my wonderful, amazing producer here at Strong Island Radio, Strong Island Entertainment. Thank you so much, listeners. And as always, I wish you peace and love and unity and good food, good, healthy food, and fun. Go have fun. Thanks, everybody. Bye.